So now we've been through 4 lessons. We started off with regression, and then we moved on to statistical hypothesis testing. So both of them were about statistics and how we can use them. And then we moved in a different direction. We looked at SIR models and the spread of diseases. And we learned how this billion-dollar Google algorithm worked. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to discuss a little bit. I've got some guests with me who you might recognize from earlier, but they can introduce themselves again. Amy, please could you introduce yourself and say where you come from?
Yeah, so I'm Amy. I'm from the University of Stellenbosch. I'm currently a PhD student, and I'm from a physics background. So what I work on at home is more related to quantum mechanics and quantum computing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily Morgan. I'm from Rhodes University and I'm currently doing my master's in bioinformatics. What we do is we try and run simulations of proteins, and what we're trying to do at the moment is see whether we can predict mutations for residues. Yeah, machine learning.
Patience.
Hi, my name is Patience Atkunda Jafu. I am from Makerere University, Uganda, and I am working on a project where I'm using machine learning in the diagnosis of breast cancer using radiology and cytology data.
And as I said, we've had sort of 2 different parts of what we've done. We started with 2 statistical lessons, then you 2 moved on to SIR models, and then you went over to Google. Could you, Patience, explain to me the difference between those statistical models at the start of the course and the types of models that you've been working on or explaining in this course?
Okay, so the models, I worked on the SIR model, and this model is very helpful in understanding the dynamics of disease spread and in order to inform the decisions that may be taken in order to curb the disease spread. And the models that I'm using in my research to do with medical image analysis. And so they 2 use different kind of data. While this uses image data, the other uses other kind of data.
So your image data type approach, that would be maybe closer in a way to the statistical models that we looked at the start. You're trying to detect patterns in that data, while the other models are more about kind of understanding the mechanism.
Yes.
Okay, Emily, could you say a little bit more about you, because you're also trying to understand mechanisms in your research. Could you say a little bit about the difference between that mechanistic and statistical approaches?
So we want to try and determine how proteins will move and how their structure changes over time, because we want to try and simulate what would happen in a cell for them. So we have to be able to try and model how that will happen, because we can't get that through like experimental data. We have to try and use like computer simulation to be able to see those kinds of things. But then what we can try and do is through that, then go and use statistical tests based on the data that we've then simulated to see whether we can get any information.
So you actually simulate things in order then to build the models. That's part of what you do.
Yes.
Okay, fascinating. And would those simulations, would they build up on the same type of differential equations that you presented in the SIR model?
They do use differential equations, because we basically have the positions of every single atom in our protein, and we have to try and see how those positions of the atoms will change over time.
Okay, so that's a lot of equations.
Yes.
If you're going to describe every...
Yes, so the software does that for us.
Okay,
Yeah.
And that's what molecular dynamics is.
Yes,
It's like the dynamics of the molecules, like we saw the dynamics of the people in the SIR model. Is that a good comparison?
Yes, good comparison.
And then the Google algorithm, I mean, explain to me how that sits in this
Yeah.
idea of statistical versus mechanistic modeling.
Yeah, I think it's actually very nice to contrast those two models because you can see very clearly with the SIR model, the variables that you're dealing with are continuous, even though we're dealing with discrete populations. Whereas in the Google model, it's like a discrete network. We're looking at how information is moving between the nodes. So we have to treat the problem like quite differently. So I think it's quite nice actually to contrast those two things. Yeah.
And then you're a physicist, but you work on like social behavior, or you're interested in these things. Can you explain like how a physicist thinks and breaks down problems, and why a physicist works on not just on physics but on everything else?
Yeah. Maybe just as a physicist, you have like a natural curiosity about everything. But I think obviously, coming from a physics background, we do use mathematics a lot. So it's really useful to learn these techniques because things like working with differential equations, it translates very well into so many other different problems. So the same kind of mathematical understanding that you have about, say, the molecular dynamics, which is based on physics and the interactions between particles and nuclei and electrons in the atom, that knowledge translates really well to understanding like other problems, like how is disease transmitted between populations, and
so when you first hear about a problem, what sort of steps do you take to break it down and understand it? Have you got any tips for if we want to start studying social behavior or anything else? What's the starting point?
Sure, that's a very broad question.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a whole topic of a whole book. Well, I think it's always good to kind of balance your intuition with maybe what a machine learning model might tell you. So there's a lot of machine learning models that are a bit like PageRank, where you just kind of feed in the network and it gives you an output.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good idea to come maybe with a bit more of a physicist approach and say, look, what do I expect to happen? Like, what is my intuition? Which, like in the video we looked at, what is our intuition about which pages should be highly ranked or not? Or like in the disease model, are things changing in a way that we would expect? So I think it's important to use your knowledge of the system and your expertise to predict things beforehand, so if the results are sensible.
Oh, that's fantastic. So instead of just like immediately going in, you try to understand aspects of the problem.
Yes, exactly.
And Patience, you're starting your PhD now on image analysis and detecting patterns in this. Could you tell us a little bit about that application?
So I am working on breast cancer data, in which I am using breast ultrasound data to be able to diagnose breast cancer, to look at an image using machine learning models and be able to tell whether this image has breast cancer or not. That is, if there's been a tumor, and if this tumor is benign or malignant, so that the doctor is able to determine whether this patient can be taken to the next level, which is cytology or pathology. And so and then I'm also using cytology data in case this patient is forwarded to the pathologist for further diagnosis. Then this cytology data that is obtained from them is then diagnosed, or we use machine learning to again look at this data to be able to know whether the patient has cancer or not, so that it informs them on a next decision to take.
And so when you say machine learning, you'll take lots and lots of images of there maybe be labeled images where you've identified where the breast cancer, where the tumor is, and then you try to use that to make predictions on future scans. Is that about what you do?
Yes, that's what I do. So the images have to be first annotated to be able to know.
So there's a human who writes on where the malignant tumor is.
Yes, so the radiologist has to write and show that in this location of the image there's a tumor, and this tumor is benign or it is malignant, and so the model should be able to learn the patterns in this data to know if this image looks like this, then it is it shows that this tumor is malignant, and then this tumor, depending on what has been seen, then it is benign, and so it is able to tell when faced with some kind of data that
And
it has
so
not
when you
seen
do the
before.
final thing, will it just be made up? Will it just be the AI or the machine who's making the decisions, or will a human look at them as well?
The human will look at them as well in the end, because eventually it's meant to aid them in decision making, to ensure that they are accurate in their decisions, and also to ensure that they're actually faster in how they interpret these images. And for example, the cytology data is not image data in its form, and so when this it's on a slide, and so we'll digitize this slide and enable the machine learning model to be able to read what is on the slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're also working on something which could save lives in the future, Emily. So you've been working on COVID and predicting mutations. Could you say something a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So what we're essentially trying to do is we want to understand, so COVID is a virus which is made up of many different proteins. And often we try and create drugs that will target specific proteins within that virus, which will then mean that we can essentially cause it to like stop working or not be transmitted. There's many different ways of doing it, but we have to be careful because there's a lot of drug resistance, right? So the virus could mutate, and suddenly the protein that you were targeting is suddenly not going to have the same structure anymore, and so your drug doesn't work, and the virus can continue spreading. So we want to try and stop that, but then you have to predict what will happen in the future, because we don't know where these mutations are going to happen. So we want to try and see if, knowing what our current structures are, whether we can like predict what will happen in the future.
Because it was a very big, important mutation predicted in South Africa, wasn't there, during the outbreak, if I remember correctly?
I think there was.
Was it the Delta variant? Or
it was a variant of concern, yes. Okay. I think. Okay. Which one? Was it?
I don't know.
Was it beta? Or delta? I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, actually.
We're predicting the next one anyway, even if we didn't get the previous one. That's very good. I want to change area a little bit, because the next part of the course, we're going to suggest you do your own data project and work with that. So I'll start with you, Amy. Could you say, what are the benefits of like working with your own data and trying to learn that way?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits. I mean, I think first of all, you just get a taste of what it's like to work on a project from beginning to end, and like all the difficulties that come with that, because you have to find your own data, and then you have to realize that the data has some problems. And so I think it's a really great way to get a taste of what it's actually like, you know, if you are working in a data science position or later in your PhD, just to get a taste of what it will be really like.
Because you said that like the data has some problems, and that is often a big thing, isn't it?
Yes,
it's not
exactly.
that we use like cleaned up data sets in what we present because we don't want to spend a lot of time, but a lot of time is spent doing that type of thing.
And also, if you have a specific problem that you're really enthusiastic to work on, then finding the right data for that can also be difficult. So sometimes just matching what you want to do and what the data can actually provide you is also another problem, another task.
Yeah. And there are some websites available, aren't there, Emily, where you can download your own data? I'm putting you a bit on the spot. I'm asking you about but there is, you can actually find these data sets online to start working with.
Yes, there are plenty. And also you might be able to privately, like within your own university, you might be surprised as to what sort of data you might be able to get from other people who are collaborating with universities, and they might have private databases of information that you can use as well.
Okay, so if you're interested in a particular problem, you can start by trying to find what data's collected, or start by trying to formulate your own model, and then you can take it from there.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, there's also a lot of like competition websites where people run data science and machine learning
Yes.
competitions that are also really good sources of data. So that's websites like Kaggle, but also like an Africa-specific one, which is called Zindi. And I'm sure we'll provide links for that
Okay.
in the
Yeah,
course.
we certainly will.
Yeah.
No, that's really fantastic. It's been great having you and talking to you all about difference between machine learning and modeling and all of those aspects. And I think the next stage for any of you who are watching this is to start downloading your own data set and solve a few problems by yourself.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.